Members of the public. It's great to see such a nice turnout for a special occasion for us. So we're here tonight to pay tribute to Mr. Fred Parker. Fred's contribution to the fire services has been significant and spans almost 7 decades, which I believe has probably never happened before. My time with Fred has been quite short due to my inception here not too long ago, but he has actually been quite an inspiration to me, and he is the perfect example of dedication and commitment to service. On behalf of Sooke Fire Rescue, I'd like to thank you for your service. So I'll make some introductions now, and before I do that, I would also like to actually recognize Fred's lovely wife, Val. She couldn't be here tonight. She's a little bit under the weather, but along with Fred pursuing his career and being in it for such a long time, he's obviously had the support of a loving wife. So that's special in these circumstances, and we appreciate her support as well. Thank you. So tonight with me, there's a few gentlemen that are going to say a few words. Deputy Chief Matt Barney, want to just stand up, Matt, please? Okay. We have retired Deputy Chief Rick McLeod. Can you stand up, please? And we have the Sooke Firefighters Association President, Paul Sutherland. And before everybody sits down, I would like retired Fire Marshal Fred Parker, please stand up. Okay. Thank you, Fred. Okay, I'll pass it over to Deputy Chief Barney.
Right, Your Worship. So, yeah, we'd just like to present and have an honor of having Fred within our department. Fred joined our department.
Okay, thanks everybody. Mayor Tate, want to say a few words, please?
Thank you, everyone. And on behalf of council and the District of Sooke, Fred, we do wish to extend our gratitude to yourself and to your family. I have here a certificate for the 11 years that you served with us, but I know that obviously your history is so much longer than that. And just thank you for being an inspiration and a mentor to many. It seems though in Sooke that once you retire serving as a volunteer from one organization, you'll soon have a few others waiting to scoop you up. So excited to see what the next leg of your journey will lead to, and no doubt you would be welcome anywhere you went and be a leader and an inspiration to many. But of course, if you just choose to enjoy time with your family, I'm sure we could all respect that as well, at least for a few days, right? Thank you. So thank you, everyone. So that completes the presentation. So if you would like to stay, of course, we'd love to have you. However, if you feel that you're here just for the presentation, this might be a good time to exit. Thank you. Okay, thanks, everyone. Okay, turning back to our agenda tonight, our next delegation is item 5.2, and this is our building permit process. And tonight we welcome a presentation from Mr. Herb Haldane. So Mr. Haldane, if you could please come up, you'll just need to turn on the microphone. And when you begin your presentation, we'll begin the timer and you have 5 minutes.
Yeah. You can. You don't have
We'll,
to-
we'll just see if we can fix it so that the folks viewing from home can hear you.
Great, now I have to make sense.
Sorry about that, everyone. Just a small technical challenge here.
That's okay.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Haldane.
Yeah, hello, Herb Haldane, 3118 C Otter Point Road. The reason I came here tonight, I guess originally I was gonna go over a bunch of the particulars on what I liked, didn't like, and what other people have mentioned to me about what's poor about the process and stuff. But I think at this point, more importantly, what I need to do is to come up with a solution to how we can get where we need to get on both sides. You guys have a provincial mandate to come up with more housing to try and streamline the systems in development and in building permit process. And I'd like to be a part of how we can maybe make that work. So rather than this be about criticizing and coming up with who did what, who could do something better, worse, or otherwise, I think my proposal here would be to come up with a committee structure with a couple of counselors, people in the industry, and then some staff members, of course. And then you could basically put your heads together on what's worked in the past. I mean, I built my first house in 1989, and then I'm still doing it to today. So having experience in how we got there back then, all the way to how we're not getting there now, and whether it's 40 days, 2.5 months, which was my last permit, or whether it takes 3 months or so on, we have to come to an idea process on how we can make that work better. And the only way we're gonna do that is if we put our heads together rather than us, adversarially go at each other of whose fault it is or who made it work poorly or whatnot. We've got a bunch of new staff, and we've had staff turnover over the years here. And every time we do get new people in, some think they have a better idea of how to make some stuff work or not. But we have had stuff work in the past really well in some cases, and stuff worked poorly in the past in some cases. So I think if we put our heads together with some new people, new ideas, I think we could probably get to where we need to go. I've met most of the staff. We've all talked on different levels. I've met Maya now for coffee quite a few times to go over some of the issues that I've been having, and basically come to the realization that adversarially doesn't make anything work, and we can keep splitting up our town over ideas and how we can fix stuff. And if one side stands their ground and the other side fights them on it, and we have another election, we turn over new people, we can go back and forth for years. But I just as soon come up with some solutions that we can work in a bipartisan way here so we can start getting something done. If the province pushes their weight and makes us do it a different way, then we won't have any choices. So if we show the maturity here and make it work, especially as a group, as a small town, maybe we can come to conclusion and make this take 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something reasonable for everybody. And maybe we can get some housing out of it. The big thing to remember is this is single family homes, part 9 of the building code. It's not engineers, it's not multifamily, and it's not commercial. It's just part 9 single family homes. And some have suites and so on. But, you know, if we can get to a place where we can get people into rental housing for reasonable, and we can start getting people into for sale housing for a reasonable amount of money. And I don't expect everybody knows how to make that work or not, but according to the national stuff that I've been reading, it's a Canadian problem. It's not just a Sooke problem. It's not just a Langford problem. So it's right across the country, even in Nova Scotia and places like that, they're having housing problems, finding rent problems. So those were the places we thought we could go for cheaper housing for retirement and stuff like that. Well, that's not happening anymore there either. So I'd like to be on the committee if we could set something up. I mean, that's up to you guys to decide whether you're interested in something like that. But I think it's a good opportunity for staff to get to know some of the development community, some of the counselors to get to know some of the development community, and then we can all work together at a solution. Keep in mind, development brings in a lot of money to the community. So if you want stuff paid for in that, we have to find a way to work with them, because we're going to have a lot of expectations coming up in the future. Because the one thing to stop traffic from going into Langford in this town is to start getting some stuff in our own town. We need a movie theater here for kids and for adults and stuff. We need another sheet of ice. We need more sports fields. We need a lot of stuff. So the only way we're going to make that happen is if we come together. So that's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Haldane. I see
Thank you.
some members of council have some questions. So if you don't mind, just,
No,
for a bit, we'll see. Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I guess I find this extremely frustrating, because it was 3 years ago you came to us with the similar problems. And we had the mayor, Councillor Loggins, and myself, and all the contractors around up here with staff, and we hashed out a 2 to 3 week period for permits.
correct.
And that was 3 years ago. And it's gone from, so, and what went wrong in those 3 years? Because I thought we had this almost licked at.
Well, I think what happens is when you get, again, you get new people, and it's not that they're not experienced or who knows where they come from. The experience is different. So you got other people doing different jobs, and maybe people are adapting to new jobs when they get here. So there's a bit of a learning curve with it. I always talk, and you probably heard me in the paper, it's a micromanagement situation as far as I'm concerned. And the only reason I say that is because I know how commercial's done. I've been involved in it before, and I know how multifamily's done. And we're using the multifamily in the commercial way in order to deal with part 9 single family homes. When you get to the property line, everything past there is the building department. It's part 9. Tony and Brad are quite capable of coming on the property and telling you whether those drains are hooked up properly, telling you whether or not that foundation is on solid ground, telling you whether or not it follows the building code. And that's all that anybody asks for in single family. When you get into commercial and into multifamily, there's expectations of engineering and geotechnical, architects are involved. There's a whole litany of things.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that 3 years ago, we were on that right track. And at some point after that, it must have worked, because I didn't hear anything from you in the first year or so. So was it sort of corrected at that time?
It did. It corrected for a period of time.
Okay.
I mean, to give you an example, back in 2013, we went to a 48-hour building permit. And to give you an idea how that worked, and this is what Langford does, and not that Langford has the only solution, but Colwood does it too, but they take longer. But the thing is, you can give a checklist, and that checklist is checked off, and those builders get to go and they start the permit. You've got 3 months or 2 months before you're even going to get to a framing stage where you need the guys to come in and do your framing inspection. Well, that's 2 months that staff would have time to go over all the details to make sure all those ducks are in order and those boxes that were checked off are correct. If they're not correct, then the whole project stops like a buck watch. And that's based on what the builder brought to the table. So if they're short, if they didn't have the proper trusses, they don't have the proper building materials, they didn't have proper drains and electrical and plumbing and stuff like that, and it isn't done to code, then it stops until it's all taken care of. So that's why they can push it further in Langford. It still gives staff the opportunity to look at the whole thing, and they can go through all of it.
Okay.
But what you do is you check off the boxes. The problem is right now, we don't have all the boxes. So when I applied for the recent building permit, they do have some stuff in the building department that you check off, and all that stuff's handed in before they'll even take your permit. Well, then engineering, planning, environmental and stuff, they come up with some other stuff. It's almost like a referral process for single family homes, and it shouldn't be happening that way. Referral process is done during the rezone stage, then again during the development permit stage. So there should be no reason to have to do it once you get to the building of the actual house. The subdivisions are passed, subdivided, registered, and everything should be done properly up to that point. If they're not, it shouldn't be a builder or somebody who bought the lot for their own single family purpose. It's not their responsibility. It's the responsibility of let's say the engineering department or planning department to deal with the person who did the subdivision to correct whatever mistakes are made. It shouldn't be up to the builder, but that's what's holding up some of these permits, because sometimes subdivisions will go through their registration, everything else. And in the case, the last one we're doing, they were missing a water meter box because it was a duplex instead of a single family. And there was an expectation of a bigger pipe for the load for the sewer on the way out. But, you know, when you're purchasing a duplex lot, you're assuming that once the district is allowed.
I don't want to cut you off, but I get you. I get your point, and and I thank you for bringing that in, because it's I think it's pretty frustrating for all of us to hear that. And I just had a talk to a friend on the weekend, and she was remodeling a kitchen, and the builder that came in, he wasn't even a Sooke builder, said don't alter anything on the outside because it's 3 months to get a permit. And that's going to our citizens, and that really, really disturbs me. So there is something broken here, and it's something needs to be fixed. So we need to get our heads together collectively and get on with this, because it's been going on before even I became a counselor, because I had problems with that same thing. It is a problem. We need to get it fixed. And we're listening. We hear you.
Thank you, Councillor Beddoes. Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I'd agree with Councillor Beddoes. It's a problem that needs fixing. Of course, it is a problem that dates back at least to 2012 and the launch of your Land Use and Environment Committee back then. To your idea of a committee, I think that's a great idea. Perhaps a task force might be best situated. Short-term work with staff, given that we have this incoming grant to streamline the system, and we're looking at a September 2023 next year to implement the system, and undoubtedly the expertise of the building community is needed to participate in that process. So I would think a task force would be a good logical way to move forward with that. I think, you know, I'd like to just note that in our strategic plan back in 2019, we did cite as one of the top priorities is improve efficiency and staffing capacity of the building permit department. And we then went about, and this followed the hiring of a chief administrative officer, the key position in this staff operation, the hire of a chief building official, a new building bylaw, and the improvement of permitting times. And we've done those three things. There were a series of steps to get there. We're looking at, we did introduce a new application form and checklist in consultation with the building committee, and that was summer of 2019. That did reduce the time lag for the average low density residential permit by about 30% approximately. And now we've gone through with the new building code, and now this project grant, and of course the other week the approval of new staff to help facilitate the process. I'm curious about this 48-hour building permit, and I referred to it as a bit of an urban myth the other week. And I look at Langford's 48-hour 2-day building permit checklist, and all required documents must be included in the submitted application package to qualify. And then there's a long checklist here of about, I don't know, 20 items that, so I suspect that their 2-day checklist is preceded by a good, I don't know how long to get there. Now you note that I think in the letter you submitted tonight, sorry, I received that quite late in the day. Where is this? Yeah, you refer to many municipalities, building permits are processed in a few days. Now, could you cite those municipalities so that we have an idea of who we should be emulating?
Well, I don't work in, I mean, basically I only work in Sooke anymore. I used to work in Oak Bay and Victoria and Saanich and so on. So I'm not necessarily able to tell you exactly how many days each one is other than Langford, because in Langford at this point here, I do lend help to some people who are building in Langford detached suites and otherwise. It's like I was saying there a minute ago, the whole idea behind any short process, and don't get me wrong, it's not about trying to skirt the system so that you can do stuff without having any oversight. The whole idea is to getting all your legals in order and even a geotechnical report, say, so that you can start building a foundation. Because really at this point, unless the Tony or Brad go there, they're allowed to decide whether the ground conditions are conducive to building a house. But if you get a geotechnical report, then it's taken care of. So the liability is off the district or anybody else in case you wanted to start building a house. There's still, what Langford does, there's still a process of going through all the applications, and it does take a month and sometimes probably even 2 months. But most of those applications take between building the foundation and doing the framing. You don't really need to get to that point until you're at lockup. Okay. So they do have time to go through a lot of the stuff. What they try to do is they try to get everybody to the starting gate and get them going first, and then they go through the applications. And 99% of the time, they don't find anything wrong with it. I think the biggest thing they run into sometimes is an environmental issue with regard to riparian setbacks or QEP stunts. But other than that, everybody, I mean, there's a 10-year home warranty from all these guys. So the last thing you need is issues that show up because you're personally liable. It's not like your company can go bankrupt and you can start all over again tomorrow. You have to take that liability right with you to your own home, to your own bank account. So there's not too many guys around who want to try and, put themselves in a compromising situation by doing anything wrong. And none of the trades, the reason they found that building in Langford there, the one that they're having issues with, the trades came through and said, hey, you need twice as much steel in this building that we're putting in. And it was actually the architect was at fault. So you got trades guys who are saying, hey, we should be building this better, different, to a higher standard. And they're the ones who picked up on it. And that's how the whole thing started to come out the way it was. So my point is, even in my situation, I've got framers, drywallers, and electricians and plumbers and stuff who are saying, no, we have to follow this line of the code. Even if you want to try and maybe make a bathroom fit or something, you didn't quite end up with enough room because some wall had to move, whatever. They tell you, no, you have to do it this way. There's concrete poured in all the garage walls to cover any of the wires now that go right to the panel box that's there. Guys were skipping out on that for a few years until inspectors were coming around, tapping on walls and stuff. There is an electrician that I know around who won't make you put that concrete in before he lets you put the drywall over it now. He won't give you the certification paper you need.
Well, Mr. Haldane, I have to say that I'm out of my depth here completely, completely. Yeah. So this is why a task force makes some sense. I mean, in 2018, a very short-term land use and development committee was formed. And I believe you were on that committee, Bev Berger, Randy Clarkson, and others.
Yeah.
And in that year, there were a number of important recommendations made for the building code, which were in fact implemented into the model BC building code, or MIBC building code that we've adopted. So yeah, I would think a task force would make some good sense.
Well, and a guy like Randy Clarkson, I mean, I don't know if you've met him or not, whatever, but he's got so much experience. He was a builder, a bricklayer, so he's a tradesperson, and now he's been doing plans for probably 30, 35 years. So he knows all the players. He knows dozens of engineers, dozens of architects and stuff like that. He's just a great guy to have a committee. And don't kid yourself. I learn all the time, whether I'm learning even from your own staff and things like that. Rules change. You don't always pay attention. So I think between three different walks of life here, all joining into the same thing, people like yourselves, your staff, you got a very capable staff here. We all need to learn from each other, and there's some experience. And I talked with Norm not too long ago, and I said, maybe a little bit more negotiation. And that doesn't always go over that well when you talk negotiation, because everybody always assumes that nothing's in stone. I mean, your bylaws say specific things and rules say specifics, but I think negotiation is a term should be used to come down to find out where the common ground is. So everybody knows, because I'm sure I learn from them, but I'm sure they can learn from the trades and from some of the people in the town, because there's a lot of history involved there that doesn't necessarily get passed down when they get hired on here, and stuff that we've already gone through before.
And Tony and Brad have that institutional
Yeah.
memory. And we have as our chief building official, the former province of Yukon, territory of
Stan.
Yukon, right?
Yeah.
So it's quite a significant group of people could gather to finally sort this issue out.
Yes.
That's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bateman. Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, I think the idea of a task force,
Sorry, Councillor Lajeunesse, can you just turn your microphone off?
Oh.
Thank you, just avoid
could hear you
feedback. Go-
breathing. I think the idea of a task force is a good idea. I like the idea of working together, and I think that this should not be an insurmountable problem. It's not the first house that's been built in Sooke that we're talking about, and I think working together, we should be able to solve this in pretty short order, I would think.
Okay, thank you. Councillor St. Pierre?
As it happens, there was some discussion just recently in the Land Use and Development Committee by a lot of very knowledgeable people on these issues because they're very current and they're very real. What I'd like to do is maybe ask through your worship to staff, Mr. Powliuk, we do have some movement forward. We have some solutions in the works, or I don't know solutions, but we're trying to find solutions in the works. I'm actually curious about the timeline because we've talked about looking for efficiencies. That's I see it in the minutes of our last meeting. I know that we're looking at potentially finding out where some of the bottlenecks are in terms of professional certifications and getting professionals. Where can we skip them and where can the district take on more risk and actually speed things up? But I'm curious as to when we can actually be looking at some of this stuff maybe rolling out or coming before council. What's a timeline on that? And in terms of the task force, I think that bringing in additional experts could be useful. We already actually have quite a lot of really good people on the Land Use and Development Committee. And I think that what we really need is a goal. So for example, one of the things that Langford did do was they decided on a goal, 48 hours. That might not be our goal, but as has been suggested, if we decide our goal is 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever the hell it is, we find a way to reach that goal. And we put some people on it and we figure out how to get to that goal. I don't know that we need specifically a task force, but I think that we should actually set some objectives and then find a timeline to reach those objectives.
Mr.
And Mr.
Powell?
Powell.
So we've just begun the review of these items, and this was the item that CEO McInnes had mentioned to council previously. So that work's currently underway. I'd like that work to be completed over the course of the next few weeks. So, if this is something that we can get back to council with an update, but by the end of, say next month, it's March, tomorrow, that would ideally be a good goal to inform council of where we're headed with this, and also reporting back to the land use committee as well with the recommendations that they had made to staff and what our findings are based on that, because I think that will also inform a process if we're to strike a task force to kind of bring in some of that already researched information based on that group's expertise, and then also with a task force, if it's put together, those local community members also contributing to that information piece. So, if we can establish something over the course of the next month or so, that would be ideal moving forward on this. In the meantime, as was mentioned tonight about the hiring of another building official, the other goal is, of course, also making progress through those building permits that we currently have under review, which we are making progress on already just since last week with the hiring.
Just if I can add to that. So my understanding is the hiring, you just mentioned Mr. Powell, just to catch up on some of the backlog. Part of it also, my understanding is there's been identified of some process issues in the current building bylaw. So those will be coming to council where staff have identified some process problems that need to be remedied. So that's also in the works now. And then in terms of using the word task force, if we move in that direction, it'd probably be easier just for the mayor, myself, to call a standing committee, because then it's a very specific one and can move faster than a select committee. So just thinking of local government context and what works, so that we have standing or select committees there in either form. And then the other piece, just I had inquired today a bit more about what happened to the 48-hour building permit. So back in the day when it was a direction of council back in 2012 or 11 or 13 or whatever year it was. It never became a policy though. It just became a direction at that day. And then there's been subsequent reports out where staff identified at the time that we were running into some capacity issues to meet that. So that was 2016, it looks like, when they reported out to council that we're not able to meet this. So it did come to a council meeting at that time. And then the problem for many years was not increasing the capacity. So then we ran into a point where we didn't even have a planner working at the district, and our building inspectors, we only had 2 and 1 was on leave. So that leaves 1 person trying to do a lot. So things did go awry, and I'm not trying to make excuses, it's just sort of explaining what happened here. So then over the years, things have changed. I think the last time there was an update was in 2018, and there was a legal challenge about the districts and the liability that the district would be exposed to. So there were some concerns raised there. And then it did pick up though. I think it was 2019 when we met here. So it's 3 years ago, my goodness. And then of course, with the pandemic, the challenge that we have there is we did have staff depart, new staff joined us, and then our operations were, to recall the words of the Minister of Affairs at that time, said, we're all building an airplane and flying it at the same time. Well, for me, the airplane hasn't landed yet. It's still kind of in the air. I think it's about to touch down soon, which would be great, but it's still up there. So anything built in that type of a way is not sustainable. There's good people for sure, but if you're going to build an operation and then run it at the same time, it was meant to be, I think, for a very short period of time. I don't know that any of us wanted to believe the pandemic was going to stretch on as long as it has. I certainly did hear that from someone, but I didn't want to believe it at the time. And now here we are 2 years later. So, and then of course, just an overwhelming demand and interest in our community that I think is beyond what anyone of us thought. So there's all of those pieces there, but I think what I want to assure you at the moment is that we really appreciate you coming here tonight. I think we'll look for the solution. And I think Matthew wanted in not the end of this month, but an update at the end of next month or sooner. So we'll continually check in on how we're doing. And then look to identify those. So I think that's where we do have the land use committee. So I kind of don't want to create another committee when we have a committee, because then what is the committee's mandate over there? But it's something that they're well aware of. So we'll just look for the best way to do that meeting of the minds so that we get the technical expertise that we need, the user perspective of this, the lay person who's making decisions here, and then how we can all implement those together while meeting the other priorities that we're trying to achieve here. So it's timely that you've addressed this. We certainly appreciate what you're saying, though I agree with Councillor Bateman, when it gets that specific, that's where it's not that we're not following you, it's just we really don't know quite what you're talking about because we're not the ones building the houses. But there is also likely from this, there's an educational component that needs to land with the elected body, and that means us. So we heard of Minister Eby announcement. They want to get the housing supply on. They agree that local government can decide where and how much, but not if it happens. And so that's a message right to the elected body that while we like to sit there and, well, what about this, this, and this? And we've all done it here, talking about parking and some things. Part of it is we will lose that autonomy if we get too nitpicky about the province wanting to deliver the supply, and they're serious about it. So I'll be curious also to see, as they're drafting legislation and consulting or advising local governments on what that looks like, is what we're going to hear in time as they move forward in that way. There is now a new minister responsible for local government. Nathan Cullen, I believe, has been assigned. So now we get to know a whole new minister available, but it'll be timely in the coming weeks for sure. So at this point, I think stay tuned. And we also know that we need to continually improve our communication. So as things do change, finding ways to deliver out that message, like, look, the province has come down with X, we have to do X. Did you know that this is happening? And finding more ways to engage out with those that are the end users. But yeah, I would agree that we want to find improvements, and everyone here is committed to doing that. So thank you. for your time today, and for being here. And of course, we'd love to have you stay with us for the rest of the meeting. Sure, that would be a great way to enjoy a Monday with your partner. Okay, council, so we'll move on into our next item here, which is our item 6, report from the Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you, Worship. And I will give just a quick update on the building permit application process since my presentation on February 14th.
Oh, Mr. Haldane, you might want to hear this. Mr. McInnes is giving an update on the building permit process.
So as Mr. Haldane suggested, we don't have a tool to do something similar to a development permit application before building permit. So a lot of these other communities that are processing building permit applications in days actually have a process in front of that where various things are looked at. And the legal advice that you referred to suggests that there's a number of things that need to be outside of any 48-hour process or policy that council may want to consider. Geotechnical reports, various things that are in covenants. One of the things that we have found through our process now is there are a lot of covenants on individual properties in Sooke. And most of those covenants say you must do various things before issuing a building permit. So that's one thing that we're going to have a serious look at. So if the covenant says you must provide a stormwater management plan or a geotechnical report before the issue of a building permit, what Mr. Haldane suggested we do and run these things in tandem, that's not what the legal agreements that the landowner and the district have covenanted on title. So that's one thing that we're seeing. The other piece is I would love to have a development permit process in front of each building permit, but our OCP has not gone that way. And there are so many building permits that come to us. We don't have the tools to do that pre-engineering or planning work in front of that. So as of this morning, we have about 70 individual permits in the queue right now. Most of those permits have, or those parcels have 2 permits, a building permit and a plumbing permit. And then we've got, for instance, the development next door, 2 individual buildings with various permits. So we have about 30 applicants in the queue right now. Last week, when our new building official came on, we actually issued 12 building permits and we brought in 5 new applications. So we're on the right track. We're going down that road. So we're looking at a 3-phase solution to our current situation. Looking at the backlog and then bringing the building bylaw back to council, to Councillor Beto's question, what changed? One of the things that changed was the building bylaw adoption that happened in February of 2021. If you look at part 11 of the building bylaw, it is clear what is required for an application in Sooke, and it's quite onerous. So we're looking at those things that are discretionary and may not have to come with each permit. So my suggestion to council is, I think we know what the issues are. It's the building bylaw, it is the covenants. To bring other people in at this point would probably just take more time. I would suggest that the bigger process with the grant that we have and the ultimate solution to this is where we need to engage. I think that to engage now will just add more time to the backlog that we want to really focus on getting through. And then bringing that bylaw back to council in order to knock down some of the barriers where there's low risk for us requiring various things. So I think I'll leave it there, but 3-phase process, the backlog, the building bylaw, and then the longer term process review that we're doing with the grant that we got from Municipal Affairs. And this follows a very thorough review and study that was done in 2019 by Municipal Affairs on the whole building process review. And one of the things in that review is, as Mr. Haldane alluded to, we're not alone in this. It's a systemic problem across the province. But one of the biggest issues still was incomplete or poorly developed applications. So we need to make sure that that section 11 in our bylaw, part 11 in our bylaw is focused. We're not asking for too much, but we're not taking on undue risk as well.
Thank you. Yep. When we get to public input, you could. Okay, thank you, Mr. McInnes. Okay, so that brings us to item 7, public question and comments. So this is for all items on tonight's agenda. Any speaker, you would just need to give your name and municipality of address. We don't need your home address, just where you live. And everyone would have up to 2 minutes. And when you start speaking, we will start timing. So Ms. Lure, I see Ms. Lure's.
Good evening, Ellen Lures, Sooke. Oh, I can say something else. I just wanted to speak to page 15, the adoption of the minutes for the OCP, and also the minutes on page 17, the OCP. As these committee meetings were not recorded, they weren't recorded, but they were recorded, written. But I made comments at the meeting on January 20th, December 15th. Made comments and asked questions, and they weren't on the minutes, weren't put forward in the minutes, and the same on January 20th and the same on February 15th. And I understand that there's a summary done, but the comments and queries that I had were questions that community had asked, and I asked them of the committee, asked the questions. I did meet with staff to answer some of the questions, but those are questions that were all of the committee's concerns. And I did put an email out saying that committee and council are under the same rules under the Municipal Act. You have to have accurate minutes. And it concerns me greatly with all the other committees as well. If the minutes are summarized and things are left out, then how are we knowing what's really going on in the meeting? Do we have to go to every meeting in order to find out exactly what's happening? The questions I asked, I thought were fair. They're questions also that our committee had talked about. So my suggestion would be that there be recorded, the minutes be recorded, the same as council meetings, because when you look at history, when you look back and you see those things weren't even brought up. So nobody discussed that, but that's not true. There was a lot of discussion went on and it wasn't recorded. And I would really like to see minutes recorded properly. Because we are under the Municipal Act. I know the district doesn't have a policy, but we don't have a policy because we're under the Municipal Act. We have to have accurate minutes for committees and for council. They're beside each other. So I would ask that perhaps we look at doing this properly. Because it's most unfortunate. It's most unfortunate when because when you go to review, if you go to look back and you go to review, you're going to see that there's nothing there. Nobody talked about that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lures. I will share though that our minutes are handled through our council procedural bylaw. So that's where the handling of minutes for council and committee meetings are handled through that procedural bylaw.
So, but they still require accurate minutes, I suppose.
They summarize the meeting, but perhaps I'll have our corporate officer answer that.
Certainly. Under Robert's Rules of Minutes, and this is what I have referenced previously, is that the minutes are to be a record of the decisions that were made at a committee, not what was said. And sometimes we do include some additional comment for frame of reference around the conversation, but the minutes are intended to be a record of what was the decisions that were made at a meeting.
I have another question. I see that in all of them, the comments made by the public were in here and they're recorded, but the comments of the committee aren't in here. Just something I observed.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lurs, for
Thank you.
bringing this to our attention. Yep, just turn the button on, please.
William Wallace from Sooke. I just wanted to ask two issues that were on the agenda tonight. One is the fire service fees that's being addressed. There's one item in there that's the removal of oil tanks and gas tanks, I guess. And it's charging $80 an hour to, I don't know what it is, but I think it should be qualified whether small household oil tanks are to be included in that, where they have to go observe whether someone's taking. We're trying to encourage people to get off of oil, so I'm just wondering if that fee might be waived for small things, and I don't know if it applies. The second issue is in regard to the incentives for underground garages or houses for cars. I see the logic of trying to get cars off the road, save land, but at the same time, there's an enormous amount of concrete that has to go in for the development of an underground garage. We all know that concrete has greenhouse gas implications, and I'd like to demonstrate that just a little bit. We have a new library there, a wonderful building, just an absolutely wonderful building. But if you look underneath it, there's over 800 cubic meters of concrete that went into that building. That's over 160 tons of greenhouse gases. It's housing 6 cars that are under there. An enormous waste of concrete, energy, greenhouse gases. I think we should consider giving incentives to build houses for cars. We're trying to get people away from cars, and we're trying to reduce our greenhouse gases. And I think in providing incentives to build houses for cars is just a wrong incentive that we should be operating. The IPCC secondary report came out today. Things are not looking good for the environment. I think we all should take a second look at how we operate. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Do we have an answer just on the fees and the removal of the tanks for Mr. Wallace?
That is an existing fee. The only reason that it's in the agenda this evening is because that table is being replaced and has a couple of additions. The fuel tank item is something that has been in the bylaw for a period of time.
Thank you. Do we have other speakers?
Hi, Susan Belford. I live in Sooke. I'm also speaking to item 10.4, the building bylaw density bonusing. I understand why it seems a good idea. Hiding cars underground does yield a more aesthetically pleasing above ground, but I think we have to watch out for unintended consequences with this kind of incentivizing. I don't think it's appropriate. Allowing further density to encourage developers to build underground parking. Ultimately, in the end, all it's going to do is increase density and increase the number of cars, which isn't going to meet our long-term goals as a municipality over time. I think I really would urge council to consider doing what other municipalities have done, require developers to build underground parking. They'll do it. Decouple the cost of parking from the cost of a unit so that I, as you know, or any individual who wanted to buy a unit could make the choice to buy the unit without parking, thus making a commitment not to bring a vehicle into the downtown core. Council and developers can support purchasers in this by ensuring that each new multifamily or higher density development has a good sized fleet of shareable vehicles. There are 2 good car share organizations in the local area. Car sharing has shown to reduce the number of vehicles on the road over time, as well as increase car share and also increase other kinds of incentives for people by giving them bus passes and that kind of thing.
Thank you, Mrs. Belford. That's 2 minutes. I've just got, just been called out a bit actually procedurally that items coming for first and second reading are not, the public can't comment on them because there'll be a public hearing to address that further, on, in which case you'll be able to speak to it at a public hearing when everyone will have that.
Oh, that's unfortunate. I guess that does limit conversation a little bit, but anyway, I understand why.
But I appreciated you being here, so that's where I wanted to give you the 2 minutes, just to say. Okay.
Hi, Anna Russell, Wantafuka. I wanted to talk about the building permit agenda item. And just in terms of context in other communities, having coming from Vancouver a couple of years ago, I think my neighbor waited months for a permit and it might have been closer to a year. So just to say that not everybody is doing the 48-hour thing. And as a management consultant, I cannot actually think of a management process in which you could guarantee that building permits will always be managed within a specific time frame, because even if there aren't covenants, there are always going to be different amounts coming in, and you could set up a system in which you would have a good chance of meeting a particular performance target of amount of time. But if a whole bunch of builders show up with a whole bunch of new permits, suddenly they will not be bringing in enough revenue right away for you to hire a new person right away to instantly process everything in exactly the same amount of time. So I guess I just wanted to counsel against unrealistic expectations around what can be met if you're going to be having a task force. You might be able to commit to a certain time frame for processing applications for the first X number of straightforward, fully completed applications. But if you get a sudden influx of new applications, it would be unrealistic, in my opinion, to meet that target. So I just don't want to have a lot of pressure on staff to meet an unrealistic expectation, and then a lot of pressure on council to be raked over the coals for not meeting an unrealistic expectation. And that's my perspective tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Russell, and I'll share that we're not targeting 48 hours by any means.
I know, yes, I know.
Yeah. We've learned that our ability to meet that, it's never been successful. I think maybe it worked for a day, and as far as I know, it just was a great idea, but the capacity was not in place, and then that led us to, failing to meet expectations when we weren't positioned to even meet that back in the day. But I think it's more just in terms of what is reasonable, and we have good averages and so forth, and we do need to make some improvements, which we're doing. But I think saying, okay, even 72 hours would be unfair for reasons that you've expressed. Okay, thank you everyone for taking the time. I need to brush up on our procedural bylaw a little bit more. But one point that's been made through the changes that is made is that when items come for first and second reading, that because there would be a scheduled public hearing that's advertised, and it provides fairness to those that are not present for this meeting or following it as closely, to at least receive the notification of something that's coming and plan either to email a submission or plan to present in person. So then we get the benefit of all views at that time. But since you are here and we've missed having actual people with us, it's like, well, you can't stop someone from speaking, because we're delighted that you've actually joined with us tonight. So thank you, everyone. That's okay, and I should know better myself, but like I said, it's just nice to see people in human form. Okay, council, we'll move on into our agenda then, and that takes us to our consent agenda. So here we are, and that is that items 8.1 and 8.2 be adopted by general consent. I have a mover by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. I'm not hearing of extraction.
Yeah, I wanted to extract one. That was item F. So that's to be pulled for consideration at the next council meeting.
Okay, so let me just open that, please, just a second. So correspondence received. Counselor Beddoes would like item F. Pardon me, Counselor, what did I say, Counselor? Beddoes, pardon me. Counselor Beddoes has requested that item F, LPIT notification, suit Mr. Greg Little, come to the next regular council meeting for discussion. Counselor Bateman requested that. Don't even ask me what I just said. Okay, so next regular council meeting for discussion, Counselor Bateman. Okay, anything else to be extracted? No. So I'll call the question then to receive and file. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Sorry if I'm confusing names. Okay.
Sorry, both old guys. Yeah, there is a bit of a difference.
Let's not go there tonight. Reports. Yeah. Okay, item 9.1, volunteer recognition event. Let's focus. So we have our report here. I'll turn it over to staff just to walk us through the report.
I guess that's me. Thank you, Your Worship. So if I believe it was last fall, October 2021, council had mentioned a possibility of considering an event or occasion to recognize the work of our volunteers, specifically the people that are serving on our advisory committees. So staff had done a little research. There was an event in 2013 and then again in 2017. Both were a little bit different, one with refreshments, certificates, and flowers. And then the most recent one was just an event held in council chambers with certificate and refreshments again. So I guess, I'm sorry, not too different. And then we have just done some initial investigation as to what type of events could be offered and what those costs would be. And those are outlined in the table in the report. Did you want me to go through that? Okay. So we do not have the money in our event budget is already spoken for through the Santa Claus parade. So, and given that this hasn't been an annual event since 2017, there are no specific funds for this in the budget. So it would probably need to come from council contingency or some other fund. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Machado. So the other piece to this that remains a bit of a mystery to me is that every term that I'm aware of, we've done some community recognition awards. So I recall the first time for myself was at the community hall. I think members of the community sort of nominated different individuals, and then there must have been a committee that juried these applications. I'm not sure who that committee was. I just remember needing to be at the hall at a certain date and time. The piper piped us in, the mayor gave a presentation, and one by one certificates were handed out to individuals. And so that's where there's been this event like this, but it just sort of happens on its own. And then suddenly there's folks, nominations are coming in and so forth. So it's always like the elected body has never been a part of the selection. We've never been the jurors of this event. It's more the community recognition is open now. And then we're sort of told in the past, like not to nominate ourselves or family members because it's obviously major conflict there, but that the district was doing this as a like community leadership type awards. So that's sort of what I was thinking, though I also know we talked about wanting to recognize all the volunteers from our committee. So are these the same things or different now?
Staff has just advised me that the event that I think you're referring to was done in coordination with the Sooke Museum. So I'd have to speak more with staff that may have been around at the time that was prior to my starting with the district as well. But it sounds like we might have some staff history that we could provide a little bit more information on that.
Okay, because that's where it's always the case where it's like once a term and then, but I wasn't sure how it evolved. It's just always been on my mind that, okay, and then of course with COVID, the ability to gather and do anything, and just like it all went out the window completely. So now it's the case of, you know, what do we do this term, or, you know, and how do we advance this accordingly? So, okay, maybe that piece, then we could get something different. So this is for our committee volunteers, District of Sooke committee volunteers, because we've had different committee members over the time. Okay. All right, so clarity, another information report to come on that note. This then is focusing on our committee volunteers. So my thought here is that weekends are going to be a challenge. Many of our volunteers are volunteering, which they do on weekends, or enjoying time with family. And then I was sort of more, it's just something, it's honoring the volunteers and finding a time that would work. I know it doesn't work for everyone, but maybe we could do something indoor in chambers on a Monday before a council meeting. Typically in Sooke, not a lot of people volunteer Monday night. There's some obviously that do, but Wednesday, Thursdays are very heavy, and weekends volunteers are now delivering what they're doing. And of course, some meet all the time. Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, I had a look at this, and I wasn't quite sure exactly what we were getting at here, but I looked at council chambers, and, you know, even if you do 10 volunteers and recognize them and their family members, it fills up pretty quick. So I'm really not in favor of doing it in chambers here at all. Again, I don't know the number involved, but I would think with the committees that we've had running in the last 3-4 years, you could probably have 50 people and family members. So I only thought option D, in-person event on a Sunday. I know it's the most expensive one, but we've got a beautiful little park next door here. That would be a better fit. But again, I'm not clear as to who are we honoring here. So it will be the ones on committee, not people in the community that work for the food bank or anything like that. It is for the people that work for us over those years.
It would be district committee volunteers.
Okay, like the
Yeah.
OCP committee.
OCP, climate, there's been 2 forms of the climate committee.
Yeah.
And then there's been the land use and development committee.
And I would expect you'd bring a spouse to something like that. If we invited a member, the spouse would come with them.
Depends on the volunteer.
Yeah, well, I understand that, but you'd be allowed to bring a guest, I suspect. So that's why I was sort of leaning towards D, and a nice day in the summer months outside here. I thought that'd be pretty good. I know it's the most expensive item, but these people put in many hours of work, and I thought that'd be good.
I don't think this cost covers the family. This is just to have the volunteers present. So if we're looking at adding more where they bring their family, the cost would go up to accommodate, whether that's chair. My other question though is, given the construction next door, I don't know that this would be.
Yeah, all I know is
We'll
that
be
I
busy
don't
on
think
a
we can do it
Sunday.
in chambers. That was my point, so.
Councillor St. Pierre, then La Jeunesse.
2 or 3 small points. One is that I'm well aware that the Climate Action Committee that was in place during the first year of the pandemic never had a chance to wrap up properly, but it in fact can keep on working through the pandemic. And it was a lot of work, but there was no recognition at that point in time. So I'm hoping that when we do this, we can actually, definitely make sure we get back to those people and invite them. The other thing was that the Sooke Region Volunteer Center might be a good partner and might have a suitable location over at the Family Resource Center, that type of place. They've got some nice garden areas and so on. I don't know if it would be possible, but if they had any events that were similar, it might be interesting for them to partner with the district in a volunteer recognition type of event. And then the district could actually be one of the presenters recognizing many of the volunteers in Sooke, because our committees are not the only volunteers.
Yeah.
So that was another, might be a way to either defray costs or stretch the dollars to have an even better event.
So you're thinking Sooke, did I hear Sooke Family Resource Center or with the
Sooke
volunteer?
Region Volunteer Center, which
Okay.
I think is that's where they're located.
Right,
believe.
okay. Yeah. Councillor La Jeunesse.
Yeah, I would be in favor of doing an outdoor event. I'm not sure where the covered outdoor area is. I don't think we have any. Oh, rent a tent or something. I mean, if we do it in the summertime, we can save the cost of renting a tent and just pick a location. We should be able to find someplace.
You're assuming it's not going to rain. I'm not making any bets on weather anymore. Counselor Bateman.
Well, the committees wind up on June 30th, right? So therefore we'd be looking at a summer event. And I agree, it could be an outdoor event. It would make total sense. I don't know why it has to cost that much. Can't we just fire up some barbecues and, you know, bring in a few lions to run the, I know that there must be a simpler way to gather in a kind of picnic scenario outdoors. And also, yeah, so we just in terms of this mixed messaging here, we got the committee volunteers and then community volunteers. And I did do some research, and since 2001, there was 12 straight years of annual volunteer recognition ceremonies, and 350 residents have been acknowledged. And then that lapsed. And then in 2017, you honored Marlene Barry, Sid Jorna, Heather Phillips, and Neil Flynn in Chambers. So be great to, you know, as the volunteer capital of Canada, be great to have that revived.
Yeah, that's where I recall it being the last time it was in Chambers. And it was small. It was just the 4 members of council, staff, and I think maybe a few family members. It was much smaller than the previous events, but that's where I'm kind of mixing events together here. It was just the case of, I remember it just being once a term, but obviously happened more frequently in the past. And then sometimes I get queries from it where someone wants to nominate somebody and they're waiting for the intake. So that's what kind of like, oh yeah, I have to ask, like, where is that event and who was the keeper of that process? So I think right now we need a bit more information here before we make a decision. So I'm wondering here, I'm hearing a desire to have something outside. I hear a bit more, I mean, myself, I'm looking for the community recognition piece. And then does it all go together? Because I think where the staff report was to invite just the committee members that served, members of council and staff, in which case Chambers would have been adequate as a location. But when we start to add in more, then obviously that changes. The venue obviously becomes too small. And then locating outside, I think maybe part of it being covered is the weather is unpredictable, and that the case of having tables with some food items that aren't in the sun leading to other potential issues with exposed food in the sun. So that, and to keep it sort of as a simple way for folks to meet and greet and see each other in person, because as Councillor St. Pierre said, some haven't even really met. Councillor St. Pierre, then back to Beddoes.
I think one of the things that I would really like here is for more of the community to be actually able to attend. And we know that a local government event like this is not necessarily going to bring in a lot of the public. So it's probably going to be, as has been previously stated, a very small number, family and so on and so forth. I like the idea of John Phillips. I like the idea of maybe doing it on a Saturday when the farmer's market is already going, something like that is happening. Well, we've got parking up here and it's not that far to walk.
Sorry, I'm just chiming in because I've come to the market and left because I'm parking on the road, because it is full here when the market is on. So from accessibility, it doesn't work for folks unless we screen off half the parking, which weren't. So I don't want to, let's not tangle everything.
It's just too bad because
just logistically.
I wish that more of the community could actually see what we're doing and see what these volunteers are doing.
Yeah. Councillor Beddoes.
One possible place is Ed McGregor Park. They have the band shell, which is covered. You could put the food under there. And the other part of the equation, which I'm not familiar with yet, is I still would like an outdoor venue. But again, it's the numbers. I mean, I'm hearing 2 things now. It's going to be the ones that have worked for council and these different committees. And I don't know what those numbers are. And now we're talking about expanding it a bit more into maybe some recognitions from the community. Either way, I think that the band shell would work. And there is that possibility of asking a service club to cater it. But I mean, I can't speak for them, but I do know that stuff that's been done in the past with the 3 clubs that I'm familiar with, you know, they all go together and do stuff. So there is some possibilities, but I need some more information here. How many people are we talking about? Because I'm just thinking the committees alone, 35, 40 people. I don't. Okay, all right. So
It's about 100 here. And then also it's the case of what we have available in contingency. And we're going to have another report on what travel expenses are going to look like and what we versus what we budgeted, which is another impact on contingency. So I just wanted to flag that. So in terms of here, though, it's the case of there's 2 things is let's just separate them then and focus on recognizing our committee volunteer. Did I miss you? Okay, this is where someone who sees you needs to say point of order. And I'll say, what is it, Councillor St. Pierre? Oh, Councillor Lajeunesse had his hand up. Okay, sorry, please speak.
I was, I'm used to it. I was just going to suggest maybe we could do something at the Celebrate Sooke event. And
What celebrates?
okay, Canada Day, then if that's what we're doing, we could just invite the volunteers to come show up at a certain time and give them a District of Sooke water bottle or something. I don't know. Some, because that would be a venue, there would be people there, there'd be an audience, and that might work.
It might, having been on that stage many times, there's a big crowd that grows as you approach the end of speeches and the cutting of the cake nears. So, you know, because there's other things happening in the background. I'm just saying what I've seen from standing there. Right? Oh, I might not be able to cut a cake. Yeah, the big COVID cake. Okay, so, okay, we'll just leave the Coke. Okay, so let's just focus here because that's just taking, you know, the whole point of we want to recognize our volunteers that sit on our committees. So that's what the intent of this report is to do and which option are we exploring here. So I think we need a bit more on the numbers. The venue at McGregor Park, our park, makes a lot of sense. I think we can get a PA system there. The other pieces are there. There's a washroom there and so forth. And then to find a date there. So probably a Sunday afternoon seems to be what would work because it would be, let's not collide with the fling though. And then the second piece would be information on the community recognition event and how that is done and if we're able to do it. The timing for that is very slim, which is unfortunate.
Can I just clarify? So if it's, I think what Councillor Bateman was saying along the lines where there was only 4 people recognized, perhaps that was something that we could have a third party evaluate, but it is more people putting in submissions for kind of lifetime achievement sort of thing with respect to volunteer. Is that like the direction that we're thinking that needs to go?
Yeah, and that's where we would need more intel behind that process on what it was. I remember just 2 nominators maybe nominating somebody for an award, but I could be confusing that with other awards programs that I've been through over the last few years, of which I've sat through 4 of them. So this is where the processes just need to be clear. But in that case, from what I recall, it was somebody honoring so-and-so for the many contributions they do towards our community. And then there were the 4 volunteers. And I think even the bigger one at the community hall, there was maybe a dozen people. There was a lot of family presence. So the community hall was certainly full that day, but there was about a dozen honorees that day. And so they were different. It wasn't a thank the committee volunteer. It was specific to community recognition awards. But that's where I was never certain who the selection panel was. And when I asked, I was told, well, nobody knows who the selection committee was. So that's why I don't know. It was meant to be discreet. Okay, so I think maybe what we'll do then is just, can we refer this report back to staff? Okay, I'll just get some more. Ms. Michaud is typing. Just watch her type at the same time. Yes, Councillor St. Pierre.
Would this be for staff to look at the McGregor option? Is that the idea?
I'm just waiting to see what she. But I think Ed McGregor would be a nice location.
Doable?
Well, and it has a stage. That's kind of the intent of the park. It's a beautiful setting.
And undercover space.
Yeah.
And
Whereas
parking.
this one will be undergoing,
And parking.
well, it'll be under construction, like as it is now. I don't think it'll be done by then. Okay. Okay, so the council directs staff to bring forward a report with specifics regarding a community volunteer event at Ed McGregor Park in July. And that council directs staff to bring forward a report with additional information regarding a community volunteer recognition program, including the nomination and selection process. Yeah. Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Motion, any? No, nothing to motivate on? Okay, Councillor St. Pierre. Okay. Anything from anyone else? So it's nothing to do with Canada Day or Celebrate Sooke. We'll just get specifics to do with this. Okay, I'll call the question then. All in favor, please? Anyone opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Good discussion. Okay, bylaw section. We are on to 10.1. And so this one here, we're in adoption here, is that council adopt the bylaw cited as zoning amendment bylaw number 818-600-88-2021. It's moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Bateman. All those in favor? And that's unanimous, thank you. The next part is 10.2, and that is that council adopt the bylaw cited as Sooke Core Sewer Specified Area Amendment Bylaw number 838-147-43, 2022. And that's moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. All those in favor? And that's unanimous, thank you. And 10.3. That is that council adopt the bylaw cited as fees and charges amendment bylaw number 839-752-05, 2022. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Pardon? No. It's already gone through readings in a public hearing. Okay, fine. What would you like to make?
I tend to agree with the one comment that this is actually a very high cost, for example, for seniors that tend to have these older systems, the oil tanks specifically. If we can actually investigate means by which that could be changed in some way or helped in any way, that'd be wonderful. Whether there's grants available elsewhere, because $80 an hour to remove a tank when it's already costing you a fortune to burn that oil is hard.
Okay, so what I will recommend is, because that item was not what motivated the changes to the fees and bylaw, like it was just the case where the table was included, I suggest a notice of motion. Yes, well, we have, it's adopted, but just to your point there, because that would require a bit more than sort of what we have there, is I would recommend drafting a notice of motion, and then that would, Yeah, but right now, it's not why this was put in front of us. So a notice of motion that comes forward would enable that more fulsome conversation to have. Okay, that's what I would suggest there. Okay, 10.4
Sorry,
bylaw.
excuse me, we just need to wrap that up. You called the question, but we didn't finalize the vote.
Oh, that was unanimous. Thank you. Okay. 10.4, density bonusing. Over to staff, please.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. So this is coming forward. You recall at the last council meeting, staff brought forward a list of text amendments proposed for the zoning bylaw. This was an additional item that we had flagged internally and also presented to the Land Use and Development Committee on February 16th. It was supported by that committee. And what it's proposing is to amend the density provisions section of the zoning bylaw to include a 10 units per hectare incentive. Currently, the way the bylaws read, it allows for if 80% or more of the concealed parking is provided on the site, the applicant could potentially benefit from having a 10% maximum site increase for coverage or an additional story. What we found is that's not being utilized. And the general feedback is there's no incentive to do so. There's more cost of materials if you're going to build a larger site, whether it's vertically or across the property. There needs to be another incentive. Through our research, it was noted back in the 2006 zoning bylaw that a 10 units per hectare incentive was included as part of this. Staff are not sure why during the 2011 amendment to this, that portion was removed and then subsequently followed through again with our current 2013 zoning bylaw. So based on that, staff is proposing that incentive be reintroduced. Also note that the decrease of the 10% lot coverage down to 5% is a result that our zones also increased their maximum lot coverage. So to coincide with a larger lot coverage per zone, it would only make more sense to reduce that lot coverage incentive down to 5%. So previously, it may have been a maximum lot coverage in that zone of 50%. Now we have lot coverages of a maximum of 70 or 80%. So just by virtue of that zone alone, we've already allowed a much larger maximum site coverage for that. So those are the specific reasons why we want to reintroduce this. We feel it would provide some incentive to the development community to include concealed parking if they saw another benefit like additional units for their development. As well, we thought this was timely because there is also a cost savings that we can advertise this along with the other zoning bylaw amendment that I had mentioned from the last council meeting, and then host a public hearing on the same night as well. So that concludes my summary on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Powliuk. Can you just restate the part? I almost got it, where you were saying that we've allowed greater lot coverage, but didn't do something else.
We didn't provide another incentive. So what we're
Okay.
saying is you can provide the 80% or more of your parking being underground concealed in some format, but there's a cost associated with that. So what additional benefit is a developer getting by adding those additional construction costs to building that underground parking? Well, if they can get more units per hectare, there's potentially additional sales that would be associated with an increased density in their development. So that's what the incentive is. They have more units to rent or sell to the future homeowner in that regard.
But we had something in place in the old zoning bylaw that was an incentive.
This very
This
amendment
here.
that we're bringing, we're essentially reintroducing what existed
Okay.
in the 2006 zoning bylaw. And for whatever reason, we're unclear as to why in the 2011 and 2013 zoning bylaw additions, that was removed. We can't seem to find record as to why that was done.
But the lot coverage remained the same. So the lot coverage increased, but then the incentive disappeared.
That's correct. So that's also a strange reasoning why
Okay.
the incentive was removed, but also the lot coverage was also increased. I'm not sure what the logic was considered at that time.
Okay, there's one it just, something's missing there for me, but I don't, maybe it's that.
Possibly,
Okay.
but yeah, we're unable to determine why this incentive, which is clearly something that we see as a benefit to an applicant to provide, in addition to concealing that parking.
Councillor St. Pierre?
We had a few speakers from the public that spoke specifically to this item, and at the time, I didn't I didn't want to respond at that time in any sort of an adversarial way. But I do want to explain why I believe that density is actually important in terms of addressing our emissions. Because one of our goals is to actually increase density, but it's not always clear to the public why density would actually decrease our emissions. And the reasons are that by having density, we're actually discouraging urban sprawl, which means they're actually affecting less of the habitat that's available elsewhere. So we have more room for people, but we're not actually having urban sprawl. We're making better use of our infrastructure. It means we don't need to build additional wastewater treatment plants, rip up the roads to put in bigger pipes, or pour more concrete for all the rest of that stuff and have more concrete for sidewalks. So simply by putting more people in a smaller area, we're using less concrete in all sorts of other ways. So obviously you need to account for the concrete, you need to account for emissions, but you also need to account for those things. Density in the public also allows us to have a thriving local economy, where you can actually have more retail, more businesses, more places to walk to from places where we have more people. That actually allows us to reach our goals of having a pedestrian-friendly community with jobs that are locally available that allow people not to commute and not emit those GHGs. So in answer to why do we want density and why is it a good thing? For all those reasons and many more that I won't get into right now. But density, this is not just something that we're doing to help developers. We actually want developers to create more density to help us in reaching our climate goals. So I just wanted to, kind of push that out there, because obviously that message has not been made clear to the public thus far, and it's kind of unfortunate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor St. Pierre. Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, so in your report, you reference that we might want to go to a floor area ratio calculation as well. And I like that calculation because it's a simple one. And in the draft OCP, we have floor area ratios referenced in there. So are we not already moving in that direction?
Excellent question. Yes, that is one proposed route, but until the official community plan has been adopted, and then at that time, staff would bring forward the necessary amendments to the zoning bylaw to also bring it into compliance. I think we'd want to have a little bit more consultation on the whole zoning bylaw package as we see it coming into compliance with our official community plan. But yes, that is the route that we are proposing right now in the current official community plan that that council will see for first reading.
So what we're looking at now is an interim solution.
What we're looking at is a opportunity to introduce a incentive that we feel the development community could take advantage of. We can further elaborate on that through floor area ratio once we begin to establish that as our preferred method for calculating density.
Okay.
I'm not sure there's a question here, so I should not. No statements at this point.
No, there's no motion, only questions.
Okay.
Okay, question? No. Question. Okay, so that would be that council give first and second reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 840, 600-90, 2022. And that council direct staff to schedule a public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw number 840, 600-90, 2022 in accordance with section 466 of the Local Government Act. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Comment.
Not at this time. Good discussion at the committee level. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bateman.
And I agree, I should likely save this for the public hearing, but just the comment would be, our town center is already quite heavily, a lot of parking lot space in the town center. So our future, definitely we need to have underground parking. And I think some of the creative solutions that Ms. Belford raised tonight are good. I mean, car shares, I think these are cited in the OCP. The transportation demand management, the bus passes, and this new thought, I hadn't thought of this, decoupling the cost of a unit minus parking. But that would be something for the developer to consider as a way to attract. Anyway, I look forward to the public hearing.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I wasn't going to comment, but I will now. I did appreciate Mrs. Belford's comments, and they're all wonderful ideas. But I guess the reality of the next 10, 15 years, we're going to still have a tremendous amount of cars in Sooke, hopefully electric, and we go that way. So I think in the next while, putting them underground, I'd be very happy to see that. So unfortunately, we're still going to need cars, and hopefully we can park them underground. Thank you.
And just to that point, having done property management and or been a renter in my time, I didn't always get a parking spot. So I've rented from owners who didn't have parking as an option available, didn't come with the suite. So at the time, it wasn't an issue until I got a car, and then I had to find a place to park it. And then other times when usually when a building is built, the condo owners would get to decide what their parking is. Maybe there's one or two, and they pay more for that particular one in their unit. Then if they go to rent it, they can market it accordingly. But in some cases, it's up to the ownership group on who chooses to buy as to whether or not parking, and they pay for it, like you pay for it. So it is part of buying that unit. And then others don't, because they don't need one. So that's kind of their call. But in some cases, depending on the use on the main floor, there could always be a requirement to have parking to meet the use and needs of humans, as we know. So anyway, I look forward to the public hearing too on this matter. Okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you. I recall now that I didn't do the scheduled health break at 8:20. So, okay, we're okay, everyone, to carry on. Okay, I'm not seeing any new business. No correspondence. So council verbal. I don't know. It depends on what you're doing.
We had correspondence from, I didn't see it in the correspondence package, from Lynn West with regards to firework damage. And I realized that I didn't understand what our own regulations with regards to fireworks were.
So is that correspondence on tonight's?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
So I was hoping that we might be able to get a report or just information from staff when this does come up as to what our actual regulations are with regards to fireworks, what we have that controls them. Do we have any controls in place? That type of thing.
Okay, so we'll follow up for that. I'm seeing a nod, and feel free to call Chief Ryder in the meantime, but the correspondence is making its way to us. It's likely the cutoff date.
Yeah, that was it. That's all.
Okay. Well, next time, Chief, when it's on the agenda. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, turn off your microphone. Okay, council reports. I'm just reminding folks to turn off their microphone. Go ahead, Councillor Beddoes.
It's not really a committee, but we did mention very briefly about Canada Day. I can give you a bit of an update if you wish.
Yes.
One is talking to a very good staff member here. This person, I won't mention her name, suggested instead of cake that we do cupcakes because of COVID. And I thought that was a marvelous idea. And I think that's where we're probably going to go. Just let you know that it's going before the community association tomorrow night at their meeting. And once they give the okay, then we'll proceed with the whole program. The idea is that my understanding is we're not going to go to an all-night event. There will not be fireworks, only because we can't get fireworks. There's a shortage. And even the 9 o'clock gun in Vancouver can't fire anymore because they can't get black powder. So there's no guarantee that we get them. So instead of going from noon or 1 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night, we are going to go from noon to 6 and have an abbreviated version. The logging show will be there, and it does involve a $3,000 deposit. And if it's canceled by any of us, they just keep it till the next time that they can show up, which they did the last time. So it'll be an abbreviated one. We will be doing VIPs and an honor guard and things like that. So it is going to happen. And I'm just tickled pink that we're going to have something in this community that we can celebrate, although we will miss the fireworks. But it might be something that I know the chief is looking into other venues for the fireworks for the future because of the fire hazards, maybe do them over the harbor. That's in his capable hands, but it's moving ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Beddoes. And that makes sense, really. That might help save some money on costs.
Yeah, there is some thoughts about asking for more money, but I think with the budget we have, it'll be close. We may be just fine. You know, we don't have to hire security all night.
Yeah.
The buses don't have to run that long. We still need a bus, I suspect, but you know, it'll be paid for by the hour. So there could be some cost savings, and there's some pretty good consultant staff here that have experience putting events on, and not just cupcakes, but could be other good ideas there too.
No, that's great because some, you know, in the past, we have had challenges with the fireworks, extreme weather events that prohibit us from discharging them with good reason. So we made that call. And then it was brought to my attention that when the launch site moved across to the other side of the river, that some of the embers might have damaged the all-weather field. So the proximity to the field with the debris that falls might be a challenge. So it makes sense to actually look at what a better location would be. And then just, you know, I sort of think with the weather trends, maybe it'll be a flight of drones in the future that we're starting to see in various places because it's just impossible with the extreme weather to launch them. There's still, you know, and so it's something just to we'll get more information on, but that's fine. Okay. Other updates, Councillor Bateman.
Sure. So very exciting on Friday for the library opening. You know, $7.5 million, and you walk in and you know, on Friday afternoon, it was filled with young children and their parents and a lot of teenagers and a number of us old timers sort of wandering around, marveling at this modern library here in the heart of Sooke. It's quite something. There was also the coldest night of the year walk on Saturday night, which raised $21,000 again this year for the Sooke Shelter Society. And the mayor and the Shelter Society's Melanie Cunningham did some opening remarks. And the mayor made the good point that the colors this year of the toque are yellow and blue, and the Ukraine right there. So you bridge that because it was you know, the opening of the library and the coldest night of the year and the possible outbreak of World War III all at once. So kind of puts things in perspective. I also, you mentioned the guiding lights, the Girl Guides event, which I, as acting mayor, I got to I don't know what I did. I spoke, and Councillor Beddoes was there, and Ms. Frobel from Corporate Services was there to switch on the light. And among the things I said was I celebrated the fact that this council has 3 women as role models and examples of the possibilities for girls and women in this brave new world. And I urge them all to identify and follow their various blisses and to effectively take note. Right. And we were rewarded with all those cookies, right? A half dozen boxes, most of which went into the staff lunchroom. So hopefully, they were devoured very rapidly. And finally, the Climate Action Committee last week, the amazing presentation by Jack Anderson. I don't know, are you going to speak to this? Councillor St. Pierre? No. So Jack Anderson's with Nanaimo-based Green Plan, and he brought forward the idea of the farm hamlet template, which is a farm micro-village, basically, by any other name. And it's a place that provides housing solutions on farmland for farming families while improving community food security. And so on a piece of land, you would have on the piece that is the least arable. No, that's not the right word. Arable, yes. That's where you would cluster a collection of permanent and temporary housing. And this would be truly affordable, get people back on the land and working. And it's the proposal will be coming to council with a request for a staff report. So the Climate Action Committee approved that. And the great thing here is Mr. Anderson is backed by the consultants on this project include Guy Dauncey, who we all know, I believe, and Heather Pritchard from Farm Folk City Folk, and a gentleman with Kwantlen College and food security who actually lives here in Sooke. And CAO McInnes and Councillor St. Pierre have all, it's quite an exciting project, and it's a pilot project that is scalable to small or larger farm settings. And here in the 50th anniversary year of the Agricultural Land Commission, it's a really brave, bold, new solution to a number of issues. So.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, the Climate Action Committee, the Jack Anderson's presentation, I was thoroughly impressed with that as well. And also with our Climate Action Coordinator and her presentation, I thought was great as well. I met with the Community Act Dev Committee last week, where Ms. Carolsfeld also presented on metrics and tools for green business in Sooke. And we also had an excellent presentation from Jonathan Dick and Sandra Richardson from Victoria Foundation and Vital Signs. Was very encouraging, and the work that they do is just amazing. I didn't take very good notes, so I can't tell you too much about it. But and I also visited the library on the weekend and just was thoroughly impressed with the quality of construction, and it's just a beautiful space, and I think I'm going to be spending quite a bit of time there. And other than that, I just want to say that my thoughts are with the people of Ukraine and all of Europe, actually, and with Russia as well. I have a lot of Russian friends, and what's happening there is not the Russian people. It's one lunatic that's causing all the grief there, and so I don't want people to think badly of the Russian people, because they're not in favor of what's happening either. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Lajeunesse. Just to close myself, I was on the selection committee for the Order of BC a couple of years ago. And so the event, there was a virtual recognition of the recipients a couple of years ago, but the event itself was postponed and delayed due to COVID, obviously. But it's actually going ahead this Thursday. So they're putting together at Government House. So I'll have the opportunity to attend that event in person, which will be really nice. I just think about what to wear. It's kind of been a while, right? And then also I'm on the BC Achievement Award. So this is where I'm sort of confusing the selection and processes together, because just what's on my mind at the moment. But it's inspiring work to read through all of the nominees and just to see how folks are making a difference in their respective communities. This is for BC. And then my role is to pick out the top 40, which is proving to be nearly impossible, because it's just amazing work that's occurring. It's very inspiring. One thing I do have coming up on International Women's Day is I might have shared with you my involvement with UN Habitat and the Urban Development Group. So they're doing a 2-day session, North America, women and urban sustainability goals. So I'll be one of the speakers on the second day. And it's always fascinating just as I look through the program and who'll be speaking. So there's because it's in Ontario, there are a lot of folks from Ontario, including the Lieutenant Governor there, followed by different MPs and so forth. But there's a speaker coming from Mexico that'll be talking about the feminist approach in the Mexican content, member of parliament from Winnipeg, several from different treaty nations, the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment and so forth. So it's all on Zoom, which sometimes has its challenges, but again, it's always very exciting for me, though. This means my day starts at 5:30 because I'm always like, is that Pacific time? No, Maya, it's Eastern time, as we always tell you. But I'm like, that's okay. It's an early start. So that's coming up, and something I find the work inspiring. Lovely for the library to open, and look forward to that grand opening event. I think they're just still finalizing the time, I believe.
March 26th at 1 p.m.
It has been
Saturday.
finalized at 1 p.m. Okay, good. I was going to ask that. And then just timely with the Sooke Shelter walk, because after I parted ways, I went to get takeout in Route 14, and there was a bit of a queue outside. And so the folks waiting to go inside, or the folks sitting in the window and looking out, would see like gaggles of small groups going by. And so many thought it was a walk to support the Ukraine. So then someone said to me, well, why are they not all together? And it keeps breaking up into groups. Like, I just left it, right? Because I'm like, I don't want to say that I'm eavesdropping, but it's fine. And a lot of people were also giving that support. So I think that was important as well. We have over a million folks with Ukraine heritage within our country. I'm not sure how many in Sooke, but of course, we're all touched by this. And I find the events very alarming and worrisome, for sure. I think it's a frightening time right now. So I try to keep the conversation light at home, but of course it's with us all the time. So my thoughts, of course, as well. And I agree with you. There's some really good people in Russia that are terrified about what's happening here. There's no doubt about that. Okay, council, thank you all. Our member of the public that stayed with us, Mr. McInnes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to mention that we were able to source a Ukraine flag today. It will be here tomorrow. Our flag policy, section 4, courtesy flags, it doesn't necessarily directly fit, but I think we're going to put this under a district event. It does give the CEO and the mayor some latitude. So if there's no objection, we'll replace the district's flag with the Ukraine flag sometime tomorrow for a period of time.
Thank you very much, Norm. Thank you for getting on that so quickly.
And thanks to Jennifer for her work today and sourcing that real quickly and having it delivered tomorrow.
That's great, because I thought, oh, I should have mentioned that Friday, because by Monday they're going to be very hard to find, but I'm glad you found one. No, that'll be great. Thank you for that. Okay, so on that note, folks, be well. I'll call now for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. See you there. It's like this needs to be a little narrower, because like I can't see you all. And honestly, like this, like you start to get motion sickness after, like I'm getting dizzy, which is why I tend for a while, I need to just look in one direction. So I'm not trying to ignore you, but
I'm okay. I just make a noise.
It makes me a bit ill. Like it's just the way it goes. So I don't mean to leave anyone out. I just can't see that way.
Yeah.
Is all. Anyway, okay, call the question on adjournment. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.